Donald Trump had promised to end the war between Russia and Ukraine on day one of his new presidency. Then, within 100 days, today, 23 days in, he spoke on the phone to Russia's President Putin for 90 minutes. He said later negotiations were going to start immediately. In fact, on Friday in Munich. He only told President Zelenskyy about the call when it was over. In the past hour, Mr. Trump called the war ridiculous, but said it was unlikely Ukraine would get all its land back.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Fresh from a 90-minute call with Vladimir Putin, today President Trump was watching the swearing-in of his new Director of National Intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard's been labelled a Putin apologist by her critics. Now, she's the most powerful intelligence official in America.
Thank you.
Today, her new boss gave details on his call with the Russian leader, suggesting more contact will follow to get a deal on Ukraine.
I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia the first time.
It's not just telephone diplomacy that President Trump's been involved with long phone calls between him, President Putin, and then President Zelenskyy. But there's also been some shuttle diplomacy with President Trump's close friend Steve Witkoff going to get prisoners from Russia and bring them back here to Washington. Last night, American teacher Mark Fogel was spirited straight from a Russian prison cell to the White House. Clutching a beer, he was clearly reeling from the rapid change in his fortunes.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now.
This is how Donald Trump described the deal with the Russians.
Very fair, very fair, very reasonable, not like deals you've seen over the years.
What do you want us to know about what you're doing tonight? And
earlier, his Secretary of State had gone on a right-wing news network claiming Fogel's release wasn't part of a prisoner exchange.
Well, I think it's also important to note it was not in return for anything. There wasn't some deal here where we had to release like 10 spies.
But today it emerged Russia had in fact got convicted money launderer Alexander Vinnik in return, leaving many wondering what other deals have been done with Russia when it comes to Ukraine. Today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth outlined a new shift in US thinking. Gone are the lofty principles of preserving Ukraine's territorial integrity, replaced instead by a new realpolitik.
We will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace by coupling allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield.
The tempo of talks is quickening, with the prospect that President Trump and President Putin may once again meet face to face. The art of the deal, but many Ukrainians are wondering if the price will be permanently ceding parts of eastern Ukraine to Russia. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
Well, James is in Brussels tonight where that NATO meeting is taking place. James, these developments today will be very worrying for the European leaders gathered there.
Yeah, very. I mean, if you had asked European leaders before Trump came back into the White House what their nightmare scenario was, I mean, it would be pretty much that Trump would abandon Ukraine, abandon Europe, and try and carve up the world with Putin and with China into zones of interest. Well, I mean, just 3 weeks into his term of office, we may be on the road to all three of those. I mean, let's go through them in terms of abandoning Ukraine. Well, the first thing that Secretary Hegseth said today was effectively, before any negotiations start, to give up the two of the things that Putin has been demanding: territorial concessions, that he gets to keep some of Ukraine, and that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. That's not a great sign. In terms of great power politics, this is like something from Yalta in 1945, in which Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill carved up the world into zones of interest. It's exactly what Putin wants. And you can see it happening in the sense that these peace talks are going to be between Russia and the United States. No seat at the table, the Americans confirm, for any Europeans there, and probably not a seat at the table either for President Zelenskyy or Ukraine in terms of deciding their future. And in terms of European defence, well, again, Secretary Hegseth said today, the US can no longer guarantee the security of Europe. Now, this has been the absolutely central rock of US foreign policy ever since the end of the war. Whatever else they've done in the Pacific, in Indochina, in the Middle East, NATO, the defence of Europe has been central to it, and it just may be coming to an end.